I was talking to my sister about this, and there was a class that I remember in like the second grade that I took, and it was art class. And that class stood out to me as probably the most influential class because that's where my creativity came from, actually. It is so powerful. It is so powerful.
Welcome today to the Be Excellent podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Brandon Harrison Smith. What we do here at the Be Excellent podcast is we interview professors, graduate students, or senior students at the undergraduate level and get their advice on what it takes to be excellent at this stage. And today I have the honor of welcoming a guest, Dr. Leopold Green. He is an assistant professor here at Purdue University in the biomedical engineering department. Welcome to the Be Excellent podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We met actually at the Black Trailblazers in Engineering Fellowship here at Purdue University. And it's actually funny, right? Because I don't think any of us intended to be here at Purdue, whether it be for me, a postdoc, or you as an assistant professor. I think it just kind of happened by chance. But I think that's probably a strong message to people that sometimes things happen organically, and some of the best relationships or networking that you get just happen when you take a shot at doing something. I remember, I don't know about you, but for the Black Trailblazers in engineering, it wasn't even on my radar. I had no idea about it. And a professor took me to the side and was like, "Hey, there's a program. You should apply to it." And I was like, "All right, sure." And I think I had like a couple days to the deadline. So I did it real quick, put it in, got accepted, and it winded up being a very fruitful or rewarding opportunity that opened up many doors, not just for my postdoc, but also for the network of people I was exposed to. Coming from the university I came from, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to Black professionals in the academics landscape. So I didn't really get to have people I could talk to or get mentoring from that came from the same background that I came from. So it was a very uplifting and wonderful program for me.
Right.
And it allowed me to meet you, not only a fellow Black Trailblazer in engineering fellow, but also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
Oh,
06. And so a lot of different relationships, a lot of different things came from that. So it's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, brother.
What I wanted to start with is ask you some questions, some general questions about your upbringing. You know, where you come from, you know, what's your hometown? You know, I know you're out here in Purdue. I don't think you're from Indiana, right? So where do you come from?
Yeah, I'm from the Wild West. No, I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay, Las Vegas.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it's a very unique place. I think a lot of folks recognize Vegas for its nightlife and its above 21 scene, but there is a pretty big community out there that sort of surrounds, and it's been one of the fastest growing cities in the United States and probably the world. I know it's had that ranking falling off and coming back on since I was a kid. So I just watched it grow up from literally a small town and hearing stories. Like my dad is sort of one of the first generation folks who kind of grew up in Vegas. He was born in Mississippi and moved to Vegas when he was months old. So he was pretty much raised there. So hearing stories from like his generation and how small the town was then. And I used to ride my bike around the entire valley of Las Vegas because it was all desert.
Yeah.
So me and homies would just kind of go around, catch tadpoles and stuff after rainy season and grow them up to frogs and stuff like that. So
that's really amazing.
Yeah.
And hopefully it continues to grow. I know that LeBron James said that he wanted to create a basketball team there.
Yeah.
So maybe some more great things will come to Las Vegas as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of growing up and catching tadpoles and growing frogs, which is actually a really cool story. Is that like what exposed you to STEM and got you interested, or was that just something cool that y'all did?
No, I think I was just a kid, and my parents were very intentional. So
Mm.
I was lucky enough and blessed enough to grow up in a loving family. I have a younger sister, and then my two parents. Also extended family in Vegas. So like the thing about Vegas is it's really just an extension of the South. So a
Mm.
lot of families you will hear are from Louisiana, Mississippi. It's really the bigger ones, but you hear a lot of Texas and stuff, and it was the grandparents who would come in. So we felt like we were the South. And so my parents just stayed on me about just education, and they enrolled me at the time. So Vegas, Clark County School District is actually one of the worst school districts in the country, from my understanding.
Mm.
But back in the 90s, they implemented this magnet program, which is
Okay.
still around now, and it's been very successful. So there were two routes, the arts side and the math and science. And I went down the math and science side.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. And from going through that math and science side, did you have a direction that you wanted to go, post high school into undergrad, or you just was interested in STEM and you were kind of trying to still find your way?
No, so I was actually I was an artist stuck in this world of math and science, which is which
Mm.
is which is crazy.
Interesting.
So I went to the school, Advanced Technologies Academy High School.
Mm.
Crazy name, but they had majors.
Okay.
And I chose engineering as
Uh,
a major, thinking it was architecture.
okay.
Because I love the design of structures,
That's
and
actually pretty
yeah,
funny because I was actually interested in architecture as well as a high school student. I didn't necessarily go to a school like that had majors, but
yeah,
architecture, art from the architecture census was something that I was very much interested in,
right,
and that kind of like got me into thinking about engineering as well.
right,
So that's actually pretty dope.
yeah,
So from that engineering program, uh, I guess it definitely veered you into a different path.
it did.
And how did it veer you that into a different direction there?
It was just the way engineers thought about problems. It was different. I think just generally in society we come across problems, and it's kind of convenient to discuss them because we're living them and everybody is experiencing it. But something that I learned while being in that class was, there are tools around us, or you can develop tools to help solve those problems.
Sure.
And that kind of allowed me to always take a step beyond what was going on and start thinking about how can we, really design solutions. And so then from life, I just always thought about, okay, what's the problem? Well, what are the potential solutions? And I think that is really what engineering is, and has really been ingrained in me as a
Yeah,
scientist.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so from there, you went to college.
Went to college, studied chemistry, actually.
Yes, same here actually.
Yeah,
At Cheney University, I was a chemistry major.
yeah. I went to Hampton.
Yes,
So,
HBCUs.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was actually there. I ran track as well. So I wasn't like the best athlete, but I was always pretty athletic. And
What
I,
events did you run?
so the 8 in college, but
Okay.
in high school, I ran everything from the 2 all the way up to cross country. So,
More
yeah,
power to you. I think I focused more on the 400, 4x4.
yeah,
They tried to get me to the 800, but I didn't. I never got to the stamina. And then I tried the little hurdles,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the hurdles just kicked my butt.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's another faculty that you should reach out to, Yvonne Wopi.
Okay.
I hear he was a track star too, and is a brilliant scientist,
Awesome.
engineer as well
Awesome.
at Columbia. So
All right, cool, cool, cool. Definitely will do that.
yeah.
All right. And so as a chemistry major, so you did a little bit of engineering in your high school,
Mhm.
and then as a chemistry major at Hampton University, did you do any internships or anything that like kind of started to steamroll you into the space of biomedical engineering?
I sort of switched from engineering to chemistry because I thought medicine would be the route that I would take.
Okay.
And so yeah, personal reasons was dealing with eczema, and thought like I would, would
Same
love to
here.
be dermatologist and all of that stuff. And so figured a lot of folks were studying biology, and I thought I had never taken chemistry before, so might as well study it. Um, and it ended up giving me insight into like I think a different perspective of what was going on in nature that I think biologists or at least in high school biologists, I know biologists out there really think critically, but in like high school and in college, it was always thinking about like cells and molecules or plants, but not really, what are the mechanisms that are occurring, and that was chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah, not to slight biologists, but it's just more
Right.
so what is focused upon in those early developmental ages,
Exactly.
years of your life. They focus on those things,
Right.
and it's not enough, not a broader perspective on what's actually really out there.
Right.
And they're doing way cooler things than the little things that they express to you
And
in those
exactly.
developmental ages,
Exactly.
for sure. Coming back, actually, I forgot this. So you were in Las Vegas,
Hmm.
and you wind up going to Hampton University.
Hampton. Yeah, yeah.
What inspired that move, that
No,
jump?
man, I think my dad was really just for some reason adamant on Hampton. I was actually more interested in Howard, but you know, knowing what I know now, I would have taken a step back and looked at every school. So
Mm.
HBCUs are amazing and I love my experience. But maybe we'll get to this later in the pod. But I think knowing what I know now, I would have taken the time to consider MIT or Stanford or Harvard or something like that.
I agree with you. I think I was a little bit nervous. Um, from my experiences, my family gave me like, no one will take you care. No one will take care of you better than the HBCU, and
Which is facts.
that was their perspective. And being nervous, I applied to a lot of HBCUs, and when it came to funding and support, I got more support from the HBCU than I got from other places. I got accepted. I don't think I got a rejection letter from anywhere I applied to. I
That's
applied to Penn
fantastic.
State, Pittsburgh,
Wow.
different universities. However, they offered me a book voucher scholarship, and I was just like, I can't afford to go to school.
Yeah, see, I wasn't even aware.
Mhm.
Like, I think, and it's weird because you would hear my upbringing and you would think like, oh wow, this kid knew, he had all the opportunities laid out for him. But like my upbringing was still, inner city
Yeah.
style. Like all of my schools were on the west side of Las Vegas. Like I grew up in this area. But you know, I didn't hear about MIT, and this is embarrassing to say. I didn't hear about MIT and Caltech until I was a graduate student, and my advisor graduated with her PhD from Caltech.
Mhm.
And so I'm a PhD student, had never even considered or heard of MIT or any of these places, right?
I
And
think that's just truly powerful because I'll be honest too, there's a lot of things that I was ignorant about throughout my whole process. And, if I had to go back, not that I really am ashamed or disappointed about how things went. However, I went into a lot of things just very ignorant, and I didn't have enough information to help me inform better decisions.
right.
I think I would have made different decisions had I had more information, for sure. Scholarship opportunities, funding opportunities, l- just maybe taking a better look at different what universities had to offer from a research standpoint as well. Um, I just took it as you apply to schools and you go for the one that gives you the best opportunity, and you
Right.
just go from there. Um, and then also like for me, I didn't take as big of a jump as you did.
Yeah.
You were,
Yeah.
though I was looking to do so with North Carolina A&T. However, again, I didn't know how I was going to pay for school, and so that was a big deterrent for me not
That's
going to
big
that.
too. That's big too, because I mean, a lot of folks our whole generation is being crutched by those loans, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, there's a lot of talk around what might come about it. I've been lucky enough to apply for the NIH loan repayment program, which is an opportunity. I don't know if it's available for graduate students, but postdocs and faculty for sure.
Yeah, I did read some, and I'm actually looking into writing up something for that soon.
Oh
Actually,
man, I want to say when I was looking into it, it was like above 50% success rate, which
Mhm.
is amazing. So, and I almost missed it because lack of organization. I didn't read the documents carefully and all that stuff. But I think that's what it takes in order for you to be successful. You have to take the time to be organized and be prepared and be ready to act on opportunities. But that, I mean, over the next 10 years, I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm still trying to figure out how things work, but there's opportunities out there to let go of those loans.
I think it's so powerful what you just said is being ready for opportunities. That is so powerful because when opportunities come knocking, they usually don't give you like, hey, in about 6 months, you should apply for blah 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 blah. No, they say by next Tuesday, this is due, and you should apply for it. And you got to get all your information. And the better organized you are, the more equipped and prepared you are for applying to those situations or meeting those situations. But I think a lot of the opportunities I've ever had in life have come from a quick conversation. Hey, you should apply tomorrow.
My story was the exact same for the BTE and the Black Trailblazers in engineering. And if it wasn't for that, I certainly would not be here right now. Right. So
absolutely,
it's amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So let's go back to your timeline history. So we went to undergrad. We were at Hampton University, chemistry degree. What's next for you?
Yeah. So I was planning to do dermatology, but decided to do some research to help pay for school. Sure. And so there were a lot of like HBCU up programs, which would give you stipends or pay a little bit of your tuition, things of that nature. So I got a couple of those sophomore, junior year, and then I applied for UNCF Merck fellowship, which I think is no longer around, sadly. But this program ended up paying, I forget, but I don't know if it was junior and senior or senior year tuition. Gave you 2 summer internships at Merck, which gave me exposure to industry and chemistry. So I did process chemistry. And for me, realized it wasn't really my thing. So it gave me, experience, really good opportunity, help supplement tuition, and then made me realize like if I really wanted to do what I had a passion for, I would need a PhD in engineering. So I learned all of that from just like these different weird opportunities. And that's what it summed up.
Absolutely. I had the similar experience. Those opportunities taught me I need a PhD and I need to do these things to get to that level. Right. Okay. Right.
But so, I was still industry. I was still
industry. That's what I was about to say. You were industry focused. That's where you were going to. And so now you're like, okay, I need to apply to go back to grad school. Because you took some time to work a little bit, or
no. So I went straight. So this was so after my summer year, junior, I guess going into senior year, what they call that, rising senior or something. So after the first summer internship with Merck, I was going into my senior year, and it was weird. If I was sticking with chemistry, I would go industry, but I was also studying for the MCAT.
Yeah,
and doing dermatology.
All right.
So I was submitting my applications for dermatology or for medical school, essentially. And I got the first rounds and asked for fee waivers and all that. And then they're like, okay, by the way, second round applications.
Oh, shoot.
And these are X amount of dollars. Ooh. And then after that are interviews that you have to pay for flights. And I was like, whoa.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't have this.
Right.
I mean, I'm struggling living off of credit cards for the most part. Like, yeah, I can't afford that. So I was like, what else can I do? And then grad school applications, fee waves, and then UCR, it was kind of weird. They just sent me an admission letter, something like that. Like, I forget the details, but it was like, based on your credentials. I don't remember applying. I don't know if it was because I was a part of like UNCF Merck or I was a Ronald E. fellow. So I got like all these different emails and opportunities coming up. UCR came up and I'm like, man, this is close to California. I mean, this is California, close to LA. I get to go to Lakers games, get to be close to home.
Did you go to the Lakers games?
Man, we used to go to Lakers games.
Oh, wow.
Every month.
Oh, man, that's amazing.
All the time.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. It's very interesting how dollar signs can sometimes be like preventative of getting you through certain doors. And that's another conversation, particularly for another podcast.
Yeah.
But I think those are definitely some really interesting things to be aware of. I actually have a lot more ideas on where that comes from. But all right, so you went to UCR, and you didn't apply for chemistry. You applied for
Bioengineering. So I made the complete switch, right? So as I mentioned, I said, so the dermatology medical thing. Now, mind you, I hadn't even heard of MD PhD. And had I heard of that, I think I would have been the perfect candidate for it, right?
Absolutely. I didn't know about that until I was in my graduate program.
So now MCAT, I skipped over that. I didn't do the best, but I didn't do super poorly.
Yes.
I didn't take a course. I didn't have the funds to take a course. So I was literally like studying my textbooks because I had paid all the money into the textbook. So those better get me.
Same here. I did the textbook route. It's the cheapest route,
Yeah,
which you can afford.
Exactly.
And then you just do the best from those textbooks, and they do okay.
Yeah.
But obviously, I know a lot of people who had the money to go and do the courses and do better. But all right, so you did your MCAT.
So I did the bioengineering. Didn't know what a PhD meant, and ended up landing into a lab that was doing DNA nanotechnology, and had no idea what this meant, but just said, "Let's do it."
Yeah. All
Let's
right.
do it.
And so you stayed in that lab, or did you transfer?
I stayed in that lab. So they do rotations. So usually, some graduate programs, they allow you to do quarter rotations or month rotations. So you can try out different labs before joining.
Absolutely.
Other programs like BME here, you have to join the lab. So the moment you join the program, you are being recruited by the lab.
By the lab itself.
Right.
Yes.
So,
yes. Okay.
And there's a difference in the funding and how that works from the faculty side of things. So, so if they rotate, then the department pays for the first year. But if they join your lab the first year, then you have to pay. So you have to make sure that you have the funds to recruit students, right? So something for those of us who are thinking about academia,
which I am.
Yeah. But so yeah, I rotated and then joined her lab. I think she was my last rotation. I met her like my first rotation. I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about, honestly. And then circled back to her and I was like, okay, come on, let's do it. And ended up loving it. Took me a while to get an understanding of how powerful or what I was really doing in the lab. To me, I was just working with DNA, trying to make nanostructures. And come to find out, I was reprogramming molecular components or molecular structures to design systems that I wanted. And that's super powerful, right?
That is definitely powerful. Okay. So therefore, you get into this lab, you're doing these things. Was there a big learning curve because you're coming from a chemistry background? Did you feel like there was like this innate struggle?
You know, this is my thought on this. I don't think we need a bachelor's to get a PhD because the kind of learning that you do as a graduate student is completely different than what you're doing as a. So to be frank, I had no idea the fundamental concepts of what I was doing in the lab.
Right.
But as I was doing it, I was learning it. Like, think about this. I'm a chemist doing to a mechanical engineer control theory with molecules. Now, as a chemist, you have no idea what control theory is unless you're a PhD chemist and you spent time browsing and doing this stuff. But as a undergraduate student in chemist, you don't come across control theory and molecular programming and all of this stuff. But by doing it in lab,
yes.
Now, what does my day-to-day look like? I'm taking little volumes of water in a pipette and I'm moving water from one tube to the other and putting it on a heat block. And the heat block is changing the temperature of that water solution and is causing these molecules, these DNA molecules to separate or come together.
Right.
And based on the order of molecules that I put together, they start to form in very weird ways that gives us three-dimensional shapes. It's just like paper origami. You fold your paper in one way, and then you take that corner and you fold it in a different way. It gives you a very unique geometry.
Yes.
So we're doing the same thing, but what is my physical duty?
Transferring and heating.
To transfer and heat water.
You're right. Right.
That's fascinating, right? I'm
Right.
learning control theory and all this stuff
Absolutely.
by transferring water.
Right. I think that's a really hot topic there. You practically teach yourself or learn these things in the graduate programs. You know, it's way different than undergrad, where a lot of more test based things. You're probably getting, yes, there's labs, of course, but like you're not necessarily learning how to do like high level research
Right.
in those labs. You're just learning techniques, pipetting, um, learning different tools, so to speak. But as far as what aided you when you got there, it wasn't necessarily knowledge, maybe some of the tools that you've learned, but less of the actual knowledge per se, because you're learning that as you go along, and teaching yourself at the same time, reading papers. Um, yes, very powerful stuff. And I think some of those applications that we do at the PhD level can even be used at the undergraduate level. We're reading papers, we're dissecting them,
Right.
we're reading people's recipes and understanding how they did stuff, and we're trying to see if we can do it better. You know, all those things.
Right.
Very powerful things. All right. So, how did you take what you were doing in that lab and transfer it past into your assistant professor role right now and doing the research you're doing today?
Yeah, I think that just took time.
Okay.
Um, I mean, the PhD studies flew by, right? It was 5 years. So that's a long time for a high school student to think 5 years beyond college.
Or even, yeah, even as a college student, you're just like,
Yeah.
5 more years. My family goes all the time. When are you going to be done school? When are you going to be done?
Right. And I mean, in the moment, I felt like that too.
Okay.
Right. Like it. So, but with the PhD, you're hyper focused on this project and you become the expert on this
Yes,
project.
absolutely.
And that's what makes you the PhD, right? No one knows more than you about that topic.
Right.
So that took time. And then from there, as you learn about that topic, you learn about what's going on around that area. And then maybe you branch out a little bit more and what are they doing to apply to different fields, or, like, how does DNA nanotechnology blossom out? Like, what else is going on beyond here? And that's when I started realizing, like, it's not just DNA nanotechnology that I'm learning about, but it's control theory and the idea that you can, at the macro scale, if you set the temperature of a thermostat,
Mm-hmm.
the room stays that temperature within a certain
degrees. Yeah.
within a couple degrees. That is control theory.
Mm-hmm.
And that biology does this naturally, right? So cells are able to detect signals at different concentrations at different times. And if the signal goes above, then it responds in a certain way. And if it's too low, then it responds in a different way.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And the fact that I have now engineered a system using DNA molecules that I can control the same thing. I add a specific DNA input.
Mm-hmm.
It tells my DNA strands or my DNA structure to break apart. I add another DNA input and it tells them to grow back together.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm designing a controller, and then I was able to couple that to a synthetic system. So now I'm like, wow, if I can do that with the molecules of life, then what can I do in terms of therapeutics?
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
then that's when I started branching out. Okay, how are these being applied to different therapies? And there's a whole world of that. And I thought about, okay, I'm interested in the skin, and this is my personal, going back to dermatology.
Yes.
How do I couple these two?
Mm.
And that's when I got into the microbiome.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Just but it takes time with those things. It's hearing you describe it. It's like art, right? And one thing about art is sometimes it might take you 5-10 minutes to do an art piece. Sometimes it might take you years to figure out those things and make those connections between what you're studying, what you're learning, what you're ultimately interested in. Like you said, you mentioned dermatology way back in this conversation, and now you're found a way into the future of how to relate what you were originally interested in
Mm-hmm.
into what your current knowledge space is.
Right.
So you're able to create now this very artistic research world of yours, your own, to create your own lab. So I think that's just very powerful. Definitely for people to know that some things don't come together overnight. Actually, a lot of things don't come together overnight. And a lot of things are inspired from an artistic standpoint. I was just talking to somebody that's going to be on the podcast later. And one of the powerful things that they said that was important was art, not necessarily just the science. And I won't talk too long about that, but you can't teach someone to be interested in art or give them some creativity to be an artist, but you can teach them just general knowledge based things. Yeah, I can teach you about chemistry. I can teach you about atoms. I can teach you about DNA. I can teach you about light interactions, but can we teach the creativity to take technology to the next level?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be saddening hearing some of these art programs being shut down and just removed when they are the inspiration for what a lot of engineers do.
It is.
That creativity is powerful to engineers. So if you want future engineers, you got to also cultivate an environment for their artistic ability to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
no, I completely agree. I was talking to my sister about this, and there was a class that I remember in like the second grade that I took, and it was art class. And that class stood out to me as probably the most influential class because that's where my creativity came from, actually. It is so powerful. It is so powerful.
And so, yeah, that creativity actually drives everything we do. Just to take the same knowledge, you're right, nothing new is being developed. You're taking the same information and you're saying, well, what else can we do with it?
Yeah.
How can I take it to another level?
Exactly.
And go, in some different way with it.
Exactly.
All right. So
eyes are tearing up.
Yeah, I know. It's an emotional conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
My next question, because some of these things it just feels like an organic conversation. So
sure.
To get back to like somewhat of an interviewish style of things, I guess my next question to you is, and we kind of hinted on this, like what things do you think would have been more valuable for you to know more at the beginning of this journey?
Beginning of like the academia journey, or like the beginning of the whole like scholastic journey?
I actually have to go into that too. You were in industry tracked and then somehow got the academic bug, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. I was industry tracked even as a PhD student. So like my last couple of years of a PhD, I took an internship at Thermo Fisher in project management, which is actually a really interesting internship for a technical student, like doing bioengineering at Thermo Fisher, and was actually planning to take a job there. But then, personal reasons felt like California was just too much to try to make that work in. Yeah, it just so happened that the opportunity didn't really come up for an industry, and the postdoc opportunity did. Yeah.
And so, but like, while the postdoc opportunity did, what makes you like, what also spurred you into wanting to become a professor? Because you still could have gone to industry from being a postdoc too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there was an opportunity for that to join a startup. But I think, again, that was geographical limitations.
Sure.
And then the faculty thing, there's different levels to academia, right? So you have like, and not levels that like one is better than the other, but there is, community college, right? So I was headed toward the community college route, and there are steps that you have to take, right? You have to be adjunct for X amount of years before you can expect to be hired on as a full-time faculty. Because usually there's like, I don't know, maybe 20 faculty but then there's like 100 adjuncts at that community college, and they're all sort of waiting for the opportunity sometimes
to move up. Yeah.
to move up. So there's that. And I was headed down that route. So as a postdoc, I was an adjunct at Long Beach City College in chemistry, actually. And then there were opportunities at like Cal State Dominguez Hills to teach a chemistry course here. So I was headed down that route. And an opportunity actually came up, and then again, geographical wife was like, I can't do SoCal anymore, to be honest. She was like, we have to go. So we went back to Vegas, and I was still a postdoc at Caltech. So I never really said that, but I was a postdoc there for 4 years, and then BTE Trailblazers. There's Rising Stars in Columbia, which is a similar program that's hosted through Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Columbia College of Engineering, or School of Engineering. I forget which is which. But yeah, then I started applying to these because I'm now 4 years in. I'm a seasoned postdoc. So yeah, I gotta start publishing, and I gotta start getting my name out there. So I started applying to these programs over COVID. Then opportunities came up. So yeah.
Okay. And so how are you liking academia? So you wanted to go industry, but now you're in academia. What's
Yeah. So you were asking if there's anything that I wish I would have learned or known going into, I'll just say into the PhD, but I'll also say for students who are high school going into undergrad, if you could think about this sooner. If you're serious about entrepreneurship, academia, from my understanding, seems to be the classical way to go from an idea to concept to startup to the market, right? So if you have an idea now at any age, at any stage, academia gives you those resources. So as a scientist, we have access to various labs and collaborators. We have access to various industry collaborators,
funding.
And that's big. And now you start talking about applying to funding and all that stuff to help support those ideas. And that's what academia is really about, right?
Like sort of like an angel investor. All right. Because they do take some ownership of your property, but you're able to spearhead it into somewhere where you probably couldn't have done it. It might have stayed a dream or an idea because you didn't have the funding or the know-how of being able to experiment with those ideas that you had to make it something bigger.
Right.
So I think that's a really, really great and strong point there. So you are fairly new here. Was it 2-3 years?
Two going on 2 years.
2 years here.
August 2021.
Right. So I'd imagine that you're getting your lab together. You probably got some students already.
Right.
But it doesn't hurt to have some more. All right. If people are interested in your lab, what is it that that you think that they should have a passion for, or have skills to kind of have them and give them the ability to kind of be able to jump into doing some of the research that you're into?
I would say for students that are interested in engineering, synthetic biology is what I do. So this is engineering living organisms. I do systems biology, which is understanding the network interaction of the immune response, for example, or understanding interactions between a community of microorganisms. I do DNA nanotechnology, which is what I discussed before, but like using DNA as a molecule or as a material to design structures and circuits. So if you're interested in that kind of work, I think there's a few tangible skills that you can learn. And these are just like learning how to pipette, and learning what it means to do conversions. So like microliters to milliliters and things of that nature.
Do that pretty well. And there's a big difference if you mess that up.
Right.
So it's it's for me, I go to cooking. I like to say it's a recipe.
Exactly.
You don't follow the recipe. There's a difference between a cup and a quart. And if you're doing something wrong there, it ruins the whole recipe.
Absolutely. And that's some of the most important stuff. And it's okay to take your time to write it down on a piece of paper and all that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Nobody faults you because you can't do the math in your mind.
Exactly.
better off to get it right than to get it wrong. So
Right.
write it down.
Yeah, write it down or make an Excel calculator and all that stuff. So, and I'm bringing these details in because these are technically skills that like second and third graders can actually do, right?
Absolutely.
So what does that mean to me? If you're in second and third grade or anything beyond that and you're interested in research, you should start reaching out. Now technically I don't know if second and third graders can join the lab, but I think like there are like I would love to be able to work with you or students to maybe design experimental kits or something like that so that they can really see what this stuff means. But if you're if we're talking about intellectual knowledge, what do you need to learn and the kind of personality you need to have? I think you should be willing and excited to read anything about new material. And if it doesn't excite you, then that's okay. But as long as you're able to learn from that material. So in my space, that's being able to understand bacteria and what they do on the skin and in the body, how they might lead to disease or cancer, understanding what the body does in response to that bacteria. And that requires sometimes not being afraid to do some coding. So we do machine learning on the data to try to predict what's going on
Okay.
in these complex environments and all that stuff. So
What coding packages do you use?
yeah, so a lot of my students actually use R. I learned in MATLAB and then transitioned to Python and use like Anaconda and stuff like that for like ODEs and things of that nature. But I guess as we transition into this like big data set analysis and multiomics, it seems like R is the way.
Yeah, R is flexible. It
Yeah.
gives you a lot of flexibility building really nice charts. It's a little bit more tangible to learn. MATLAB is good. However, I'm not sure that it just depends on what the community of people are learning, right? And some people are publishing their information, their codes that you can kind of piggyback off of. And R seems to have a very flexible community, not just built for bioengineering. It could be sociology or different things. And so because it's a bigger community, I think there's more information that you can find online about it. And people are publishing literally their codes. And that allowed you to kind of piggyback off of that.
That's pretty cool.
MATLAB, it phases in, phases out, like Python and things, and it phases in, phases out, and you might be able to find the code that you're looking for, or you're just going to have to be a person that's really immersed in coding and just really knows how to craft a code on your own.
Right. To that later point, I think students should learn at least two languages. I got a story about that, and I would love to tell you. But two speaking languages, other than their native tongue. And I only know English, so I'm talking to myself there. And then also learn how to code. So that will be your third additional language. And whether that's Python or MATLAB, just understand one, because then you can transition to the other better than somebody who understands none trying to learn one.
Yeah. I would say even just like to that statement about learning, right? I think it's not just learning for the sake of learning it, but learning and understanding. All right.
Absolutely.
I've been in that place of trying to learn coding, and you're trying to learning as a tool. You're just trying to learn how to use a tool, but coding becomes difficult because what happens when you reach a problem that's not been coded before,
Right.
and you don't know how to manipulate all the lines of codes to get to the solution.
Exactly.
And so you want to really immerse yourself, like understanding the native language to like the nerdiest degree of why this verb has to be go first, and then you can say this. We got to understand the coding like we understand our basic native tongue. All right.
Absolutely.
Just like when you are able to point out to someone like, hey, that's grammatically incorrect. This is how you're supposed to say it. You're not allowed to use that word or that phrasing this particular way.
Yeah.
You should understand coding that well.
Yeah.
All right. And even if you're learning someone else's native language or native tongue, understanding the language to that degree allows you to communicate with a lot of different people. A lot of people are like, oh, I learned Spanish when I was in high school, and it doesn't work. I go anywhere where they speak Spanish, and they look at me crazy. And you learned it because it was a requirement for a course. You didn't learn it because you were trying to be immersed in the culture, immersed
absolutely
in understanding the structures in place here,
Right.
because everything has some type of reasoning and rationale for it.
Right.
All right. So we have definitely hit it on this podcast way longer than I thought we would, but I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. I think, to be honest, I think there's even more to talk about and discuss. But hopefully, as people listen to this podcast and they want to hear more, we can definitely do some more in the future. So, one, I'd like to first thank you for coming to the podcast. You're the second guest here, and we really appreciate here at Be Excellent Podcast. We're hoping to have you on again for more topics. I think we only touched the tip of the iceberg here about what we can give to people, and we'll see in the comments of the YouTube section or wherever this is going to be posted what people actually want to hear more about. And so, again, thank you for coming to the podcast. And I want everybody to like, comment, subscribe, whoever, and give feedback on this podcast and what you want to hear more about and what you like, what you didn't like, and we'll do better next time. Until next time, everyone be excellent.